because you are the people whose ancestors created what we have and what we have been given in this country. And it's always good to be here in this particular historic location, because after all, this summons up the recollection of those who came before and who did what they did, which is unique in the world. Unique in the world. There is only one nation like this nation, and that is the United States of America. There is no other nation so old as this republic. This is the oldest republic in the history of the world. Now that means that something happened here which was different from what happened in other places. In other places, there was freedom for a generation, or two, or even three. And then the inevitable collapse of those free societies occurred. There are a number of reasons why we live in a unique society. I would like to go over a few of those with you today. First of all, we have leadership which I believe was given to us by divine providence. It was not an accident that those men came together, and it was not an accident that there was a Washington, and let us never forget that. Think of all the revolutions in the history of the world. Castro, Stalin, Hitler, Napoleon, Julius Caesar, on and on. Every one of these resulted in dictatorship, not in freedom and liberty. We had a distinction. Washington. He did not want his people, the people who had fought so hard behind him, through all of the privations at Valley Forge, all the privations of an untrained militia going into the field, all the difficulties that they faced, facing the largest army and navy in the world at that time. And they did it with people who were essentially volunteers, people who understood what the potential for this revolution was. Was it a majority of the people? No. As usual, it wasn't. Were they special in some other way as a people? Perhaps it was the leadership that they had. Our distinguished colleague, John Hancock, just mentioned the Constitutional Convention. And there again, it was a unique group of people. Almighty God blessed this republic from the very beginning, and He is with us yet. He looks out for this republic when we do our duty in terms of supplication to Him and understanding of the power that He has over all mankind, over the whole world. That is something that we have to teach our children about, because that also made us unique. And we were unique because unique things happened in 1776. We're here today to talk about one of those things and to reflect on it. And that was the Declaration of Independence. We talked a little bit about the actual phrasing of the Declaration. It's interesting that Patrick Henry had sent a draft to the drafting group in Philadelphia. And that he sent was life, liberty, and property. That was not what was finally adopted, but it shows when General Lee showed up at the meeting and offered this, that people meant by pursuit of happiness not some crazy business with the government, providing people with things, taking from some group and giving to others, not that kind of thing, but rather people who would use property in order to create wealth, in order to give opportunity so that new generations coming on would be in a position where they would not be reliant on government. Not reliant on government. 1776, the Declaration was published. 1776, another thing happened, which unfortunately also often we forget. There was a Scottish economist named Adam Smith, and in that same year, his book, The Wealth of Nations, was published. And it was the first book that talked about capitalism, that talked about opportunity for those in our society who want to work hard, who want to save, who want to diligently provide for their families. It was a revolutionary book. Before that, there had been mercantilism and all kinds of government control over the economy. People telling their citizenry that it was the responsibility of government to help them, that they were actually subjects of the government, that they were actually people whose lives would be controlled by the government. And then here came this revolutionary book, Economic Freedom. So in the same year, 1776, a document was published at Philadelphia which set forth political freedom. And in Scotland, a book was published that set forth economic freedom. Now, that could be a coincidence that those two things happened in the same year. I don't think so. I think the essence of what our founders were about was giving people individual liberty to do what had to be done politically. And what the Wealth of Nations told us was that we as a people have the right to work, to save, to provide for next generations, and above all else, not to be the subjects of the government. My friends, my fellow patriots, within the last year and a half, this nation has headed down a path which will lead us ultimately to mercantilism and government control over the economy and the robbery of our people by the right that was set forth in the Declaration, that was contemplated by Patrick Henry, and that we were given the truth of in Wealth of Nations. This is a special day. This is a very special year, because it is a year looking backward for us on this day, at what was given to us by others, so that we might have opportunities unprecedented in the history of the world. What we received through these documents was a blessing without precedent in the history of the world. What we received is being destroyed today in Washington, D.C. by people who have neither respect nor affection for this republic, but instead are predicated on taking back those liberties and freedoms which the Declaration and the Wealth of Nations gave us. We can see it here in our own state. Today, Ohio has an $8 billion deficit. Now, when you're used to looking at Washington, that doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, we're now having debt in trillions on an annual basis. But that amount of money in the state is 17% of the state's budget. There are two philosophies at war in Columbus, just as there are in Washington. The one viewpoint, the one philosophy is that we have to cut spending, we have to live responsibly, and we cannot afford to have 18% of our state's budget in deficit without funding. For one thing, our Constitution in Ohio says you cannot have a deficit budget. You have to balance the budget every year. Unlike Washington, where they fire up the printing presses, and where they borrow money through the bond structures, and where, in effect, they end up stealing from the people, so that in the long term, this nation will be so much in debt that our grandchildren will find it impossible to pay the interest, let alone the principal. This is a very challenging time for our republic. We have the opportunity to change the direction of things. That will come this fall. We have the opportunity to live up to that which our founders gave us. We have the opportunity to see to it that our children know what it is to live in a free republic. Or we can pass up the opportunity that we have been given. And then this nation will be in decline, in serious decline. Is it ironic when the President of the United States is told by the leaders of socialist countries in Europe that we can't spend the way we are? Is that incredible? Can we believe that we are being told that what we have to do is have more stimulus programs to follow those which have already gone forward, resulting in higher and higher unemployment in this country? Is that credible? Is that possible? Let us be in mind of what we face this fall. It is not a small election. There are small elections. There are a lot of small people running elections. But the other side of it is that we know when we face a time of trial and tribulation. Our people have stood up to these kinds of problems in the past, and it is crucial that we work with those who believe what we believe to spread the gospel of free enterprise and limited government. It's hard for me to believe that the man I worked so hard for in the 70s and 80s to become President of the United States has been gone so long that the people don't even remember what it was that Ronald Reagan brought to us and taught us. Remarkable. And yet, as we watch what's going on in Washington, as we watch the deficits climb, as we watch our children's money being spent by people who are so irresponsible that they follow people who have the brains of a San Francisco left-wing congresswoman, if we... if that's where we are, it's going to be a very long, harsh period of time before we can correct it. But I believe, as Patrick Henry said so eloquently, I believe that there are those who will stand up for this republic. There are those who will teach the next generation about the difference between this republic and every other republic in the history of the world. And they may be a minority, but that is not the relevant factor that made those who came together in Philadelphia to do the Declaration and ultimately the Constitution. And as our friend John Hancock pointed out, Dr. Franklin said it so eloquently as he came down the steps of Constitution Hall. And a lady was there and she asked him, "What form of government have you given us?" This was a subject of considerable discussion in Philadelphia. A lot of people wanted Washington to become a king. And as I said earlier, that was not in the man. He wanted to preserve the liberty that he had fought so hard with so many colleagues to accomplish. There was a discussion that maybe we should just be 13 separate countries because, after all, that way it would be easier for people to keep their liberty, unless, of course, they were attacked. It was not a situation in which we had television cameras from CNN and other intellectual dimwits in the hall. That was not the case. They weren't there. It was all done in secret. So the question that was asked, as John Hancock pointed out, the question that was asked was one that was on the minds and tongues of everyone in Philadelphia. And he said those famous words, "a republic." And then he paused and then he said, "If you can keep it." We have been given the republic that he and others who were founders created. But the question is still before us. Can we keep it? Can we take the oldest, wealthiest republic in the history of the world and do the responsible thing and keep it for generations yet to come? Or will we do what other free societies have done and give up and walk away? I pray